Hi, this is Fred Green with Golf Smarter Mulligan's number 106 and the final entry into our series featuring conversations with the late Tony Manzoni, probably the most impactful teacher, based on listener feedback, that we've ever featured in the 16 years of doing game improvement interviews on the Golf Smarter podcast. After a long battle, Tony finally succumbed to cancer and passed away in 2018. I am so honored to have the ability to share my many conversations over 9 years to keep his warmth, humor, stories, teaching methods, and legacy alive. To learn more about making a tax-deductible contribution to the Tony Manzoni Golf Smarter Memorial Fund benefiting the First Tee of Coachella Valley, home of College of the Desert, please visit our dedicated webpage at golfsmarter.com/Tony. Tony's book, The Lost Fundamental, One Simple Move, Better Golf Forever, is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, and his DVD of the same name can only be seen online through our private channel. To gain access, please click on the Hey Fred button at golfsmarter.com or send an email to golfsmarterpodcast@gmail.com. Now, for the last time in 2021, I humbly present to you our friend and mentor, Tony Manzoni.
Welcome to Golf Smarter Mulligans, your second chance to gain insight and advice from the best instructors featured on the Golf Smarter podcast. Great golf instruction never gets old. Our interview library features hundreds of hours of game improvement conversations like this that are no longer available in any podcast app.
Lee Trevino once was talking about playing with Nicklaus and how far Nicklaus hit it compared to everybody else. And he says, so when I played with Nicklaus, I would try to hit the ball 230 yards off the tee. And when I did that, I hit it about 270. He said, but when I tried to hit it 270, I hit it 230. That's just such great wisdom, because that's so much the truth. How many times have we got up on a par 5 and it's a long one, so we're going to give it that extra, and we throw it from the top, and we get a little steep with it, we pop it straight up in the air like a wedge, or we hit it way right or way left. There's a speed that you have to get used to with the driver, and a lot of it has to do with defocusing on any thought of hitting and swinging from point A to point B in a rhythm that you can keep your balance. And if you do that with the driver, you're going to keep the ball in play most of the time.
With another interview from the archives of Golf Smarter, here's your host, Fred Green.
I was playing yesterday with some guys, and one of them drove the green with a flag in the back and left himself about a 12-foot putt for eagle. He had more pressure on him than the rest of us did, because we were, putting for par or bogey, and he was putting. That all the pressure was on him, not the 3-putt.
Well, but see, there you go. It's a 12-foot putt.
Right.
It hasn't changed. It's a 12-foot putt, but it's how we deal with it. If it's a 12-foot putt for a triple bogey, his chances are probably better to make it than if it's a 12-foot putt for an eagle. And yet it's still a 12-foot putt. But again, it becomes, there's a value associated with it. And that's where we get into trouble in this game. If you could, but we have emotions, and that it's easy for me to say that, but we have emotions, and we have pride, and we have ego, and we have all these things that we have to deal with. So, but there is no such thing as pressure. That's a manifestation of our mind where we perceive things that are things. This is more valuable than that. I want to be able to tell everybody I eagle this hole. And so, this becomes more difficult than a 12-foot putt is. But who knows that button? If I knew how to press that button, we wouldn't be talking. I'd be in the Caribbean in a big ship or something. Yeah. I mean, that's the constant dilemma that we all face as players. But I mean, the reality of it, there is no such thing as pressure. It's just perception,
Well, I would think that a 12-foot putt for eagle for an amateur, the guy's in his head going, I got to make this putt. I have to make this. I have to make this putt. Well, he's doomed, right? But on the professional level, a 12-foot putt for eagle to win it's a different. I mean, you're saying he's not going, I have to make this putt. I have to make this putt.
Well, I think professionals have a little better idea of what is the percentage of makes with a 12-foot putt on tour. And I think if you look at statistics, they don't make every one of them for sure. I would probably say that you've got maybe a 40% chance of making it. If you hit 10 balls on a 12-foot putt, you probably make 6 or 4. But it's a lot. The percentage is a lot higher, and that's another thing I tell my boys. Look, if you got a 20-footer, know that that's a low number percentage on tour to make for sure. So relax a little bit. Put a good roll on it, and if you don't 3-putt it, if you roll it up there close, you sometimes make it. Bravo. But if you don't make it and you get it up by the hole, good job. And tapping the putt, go to the next hole. You've got to be realistic about putts. I mean, I've had boys on my team that miss a 50-footer, and they'll lip it out and they'll go crazy. I said, "What are you insane? Do you think you're going to make a 50-footer every time?" But
But when you get that close, I mean, like when it lips out from 50 feet, of course you're going to feel like, oh, I wish that would have gone in.
But you should laugh. Holy mackerel, almost made that thing. See, it's the way you look at it. Jordan Spieth, I mean, he's like a wizard. I've never seen anybody make long putts as many times as he does, and when he misses, but you can't fall apart at the seams. It's something that's unrealistic. I mean, you just can't. And I think the better players handle it differently. They'll smile to themselves with a little wry smile. God, I almost made that. But they're not beating themselves up because they missed it. And I mean, you just have to be a lunatic to think that. But young people, especially young people, they think that everything is makeable, and when you miss, it's a disappointment. Well, not always. If you've got a 30 or 40 footer and you roll it up there a couple of feet from the hole, good job, and tap it in and go to the next hole. But again, I think that the unqualified player, the high handicap player, or the mid handicap player, or even the scratch player, we have a different view of things than the guy that's on the tour playing.
I think that when you talk about young people today and getting upset about missing 50-foot putts, you probably don't play golf video games, do you, Tony? Because they make those all the time.
No, I don't. I try to stay away from that stuff.
Me too.
Because I have kind of personality that's all I'd be doing.
I want to get into the long irons. You talked about the 7-iron and the different shots that you can have with a 7-iron. I know for me, one of the shots that I like to practice a lot, I'm about 145 with my 7-iron, and the fact that you said 180 just blows my mind. But so I'm about 145. But I also know that where I play, how often I play, where I play, there's a lot of trees. And so a shot that I have to have in my bag is to be able to punch it back out to the fairway and keep it under the branches. And so for me, I can do a 70-yard or 100-yard shot with my 7-iron, just letting it roll out, just, punching it out. So that is definitely one of the shots that I practice. So let's talk about long irons and other things you can do other than just hit, being on the driving range and hit ball after ball after ball. How far, how straight can I hit it? What other things can I do to take my game to the next level?
Well, when it comes to a club more than a 6-iron, when it comes to 5, 4, 3, 2, possibly 1, the first thing I say is take those clubs and throw them in the garbage and go get yourself some rescue clubs that have the same numbers, because it's a different world. Getting a 3-iron, 2-iron up in the air high enough to where when it comes down on the green it's going to stay is really difficult. It takes a lot of strength, and it's a much harder club to hit than if you get a 3 rescue or a 2 rescue or whatever. Those kinds of shots are. It's hard to have a lot of shots with a long iron, but you can do a little bit more with a rescue club. The width of the bottom of the club you can get it out of higher grass. You can't do that with a hoselled club like a 2-iron or 3-iron. There's no way. That's why the pros in the past, when they got the ball in heavy rough, they had to use their 4-wood or 5-wood. But now that these rescue clubs are just unbelievable. But there's not much you can do with those kind of shots, those 200-yard shots or 180-yard shots, depending on how far you hit a ball. But for me, I hit my 3 rescue about 200 yards, sometimes 210, but that number 2 is what I'm selecting, because I always leave a little bit for error. But there's not much you can do with them. Hopefully you don't have too many of those shots per round, really, because it would make a long day.
Yes, it would. I'm just curious. Are you playing tailor-made clubs?
No, actually, somebody turned me on to a club called XXIO, and it's a Japanese brand carried by Srixon, and they're expensive as hell. I will tell you that. But they're the best clubs I've played in a long, long time, especially the rescue clubs, the driver and the fairway, the 3-wood. 3-wood's always been a tough club for me off of a tight lie. And these clubs, I don't know what it is about them, but it gets the ball up in the air really easy. So I'm at that age now that anything I can do to make it easier, I'll go for it.
Right. No, the reason I was asking is because I think that TaylorMade was one of the first to bring out that club, and they called it a rescue club. I think that's a brand name, Rescue, but they're actually referred to as hybrids. Is that what a hybrid is?
Yeah, they're hybrid or utility. Like my XXIOs, this is U4, U5. Everybody has their way, but I like rescue because that really describes it to me. If I had to pull out a 4-iron today, I would need to be rescued. Believe me. Yeah,
it's amazing how it cuts through long grass like butter on those clubs. It really makes a huge difference.
They put the CG on the golf club, the center of gravity on the golf club, on these new clubs. It just gets that ball up in the air really easy. And that's what you fight as you get older. You get slower and you get weaker. So the shots that you could get up in the air, like Nicklaus, they said that Nicklaus could hit a 1-iron the height of an 8-iron.
Wow!
What a huge advantage that is. But it takes tremendous strength to do that.
Right. So let's move on to the what used to be called Fairway Woods, and now they're called Fairway Drivers or Fairway Metals, because nobody makes a wood anymore. What do you use them for? How many, you carry 2 of them, the advantage of having multiple ones, and, what is the best thing we can do to, again, take our game to the next level with those clubs?
Well, the Fairway Woods are very important because they put you on the par 5s, they put you in a position to where you can hit a somewhat easy third shot, where it's in your sweet spot area where you're, let's say your wedge or 9-iron. The fairway woods are important, and a lot of times it's best to use a fairway wood off the tee on a lot of holes. The distance difference isn't that wide. Now, I have, again, with a lot of my players, I say, look, this hole doesn't call for a drive. You don't need that distance. You can put the ball in a position where you have a fairly easy shot, and then you don't run the risk of, hitting it in the trees or whatever. But a lot of people are stuck on that driver. They pull that driver out no matter what the distance on the hole or no matter how narrow it is. So the fairway woods can be used off the fairway, but they can also be used off the tee. Now, I wouldn't hit. I would be using my 3-wood most of the time when I was when I said, okay, I'm not going to use my driver on this hole. But there are times that I watch on the tour where the guys are using an iron off the tee. Of course, they hit an iron a lot farther than the average player. But the point is that in managing yourself around the golf course, you have to look at the hole and appraise, okay, where do I want to hit it? Where don't I want to hit it? Okay, and then what's the club I can use to get somewhere in that area? Because the woods are just to set the hole up. You're not going to drive the green. So 20 yards or whatever between the driver and 3-wood isn't that significant. But unfortunately, everything is stressed today about distance and not shot making. I think a lot of people that play the game would be better off not using their driver as much as they do and putting the ball in play. And then on the second shot on a par 5, for a lot of good players, they'd be much smarter to hit an iron up there within, that 60, 70-yard range and then throw that thing up on the green. Even Sam Snead, who was a long driver in his day, said, if I can't hit a high lofted club on the second shot on a par 5, I'll hit an iron into my wedge area. That's the way you play the game.
Sure.
But unfortunately, we're seduced by knocking it on a par 5 and 2, when you're young enough to do it. And the ball's coming in too low. If it hits the green, it's going to go to the back of the green, so you're going to be looking at a long putt, and now you got to try to 2-putt for that birdie. And if you 3-putt, it really demoralizes you, where if you knocked it up there with a wedge, you got a good chance to hit it 10, 15 feet, a good chance to make that putt. So it's just a different mindset. And these are the things that you have to do to keep the round going mentally. You don't want a lot of up and downs emotionally. And you put yourself in that position when you try to hit those, hope I can get this on in 2. That's where the ego gets involved, and that's what you got to eliminate.
Yeah. I know that many times that if, say, on a par 5 especially, you can really use strategy to your advantage here because of that extra shot that you're given. So that if my drive on a par 5 leaves me 300 yards out, instead of trying to pull out my fairway metal, my 4-wood, and try to get it, listen, it's 300 yards out. I'm not going to be able to reach it. But then I'm going to leave myself a 60-yard shot, a 40-yard shot. I'm not as comfortable with those. I'd rather take my 9-iron and hit it twice and get close to the pin in 3 than try to get there in 2 and come up short and then have that awkward distance in the middle there.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Those shots where you say the 30 and 40-yard shots, those are really difficult shots even for the pros. They're not easy shots. Anytime you're having not take a full swing, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And those little tender wedges are tougher than heck.
Yeah.
So that you just watch the good players play, and you're going to see that their strategy is a lot different than the average guy. The average guy is swinging from his toes to hit as far as he can hit it on every club, which is borderline on being a little nuts.
And the same thing that what you had talked about is using a fairway wood off the tee, fairway metal, fairway driver, off the tee on holes that either have narrow fairways or aren't as long. Again, I don't want to get too close and make it a difficult second shot. I want to be in the range of what I think is a good shot for me, like 110, 125-yard shot. I'm real confident with those, far more than I am with a 40, so I'll take that fairway wood off the tee.
Sure, and even if sometimes it's a long hole, but there's a lot of problems that the designer put on the hole. They put in a lot of big fairway bunkers that are hard to get out of. They put water. They put out of bounds. It's still sometimes, even though it's still a long hole, and you're not going to be able to get on in 2. You've got to go ahead and swallow that bitter pill and put that thing in play, and then hit another shot and keep it in play, and then trust your wedge or putter. The worst thing that's going to happen, you're going to walk away with a bogey, but you're going to eliminate that big number by trying to stretch out because the hole is long without looking at the factors that are involved in the designer. He set that up for you to, come on, hit that driver, buddy. That's what I want you to do. It's like a sucker pin.
Right.
You have to use your head when you play.
Right. You know what we call that, Tony?
What's that?
Golf smarter.
Yeah, golf smarter. That's exactly right. No, it's true. I mean, I think there was a hole in the Masters that Hogan always purposely hit to the right of the hole or right of the green, just on the fringe, and then chipped up and putted. And they always said, "Why did you do this?" Because this hole, if you hit the wrong side of the green, it's going to kick right into the water. So even the great Hogan, who really mastered hitting the ball, he had a strategy sometimes where he swallowed that bitter pill because he wanted to eliminate the big number. Mm-hmm. And you got to do that when you play the game. And it's like a chess game. It's not all about force. Sometimes you have to have a little finesse.
Let's wrap it up with the driver, and I'll start with that one. I have I don't like to just walk onto a golf course and tee off. I really need, in my mind, my mental preparation. I need an hour to hit balls, to practice short game, a bunch of shots in the short game, very few shots with a driver, very few shots with my long, my fairway metal. But I'll spend a lot more time on short game stuff when I'm warming up. But when I do take out the driver, instead of taking full swings with it, I'll try to swing so easy that I only hit it 100 yards or 150, but try to, at a specific target, right at it. And that allows me to get a rhythm going and put the ball, a short distance and feel more confident about taking a big swing after that. What would you advise on driver for, again, for your warm-up session or your practice session that's going to help your game keep the ball in the fairway? So critical with the driver.
Well, the old saying, I want to swing fast but not hard, with the driver. The driver is a wonderful club, and used properly, it's a great tool. But it can be your worst enemy if you're thinking about distance. Lee Trevino once was talking about playing with Nicklaus and how far Nicklaus hit it compared to everybody else. And he says, so when I played with Nicklaus, I would try to hit the ball 230 yards off the tee. And when I did that, I hit it about 270. He said, but when I tried to hit it 270, I hit it 230. Mm-hmm. And, that's just such great wisdom, because that's so much the truth. How many times have we got up on a par 5 and it's a long one, so we're going to give it that extra, and we throw it from the top and we get a little steep with it, and we pop it straight up in the air like a wedge, or we hit it way right or way left. There's a speed that you have to get used to with the driver, and a lot of it has to do with defocusing on the ball, defocusing on any thought of hitting, and swinging from point A to point B in a rhythm that you can keep your balance. And if you do that with the driver, you're going to keep the ball in play most of the time. But most people, you watch them, and they'll swing the driver a lot harder than they do any club in their bag. That's the problem with the driver, because, again, the emphasis is always on distance instead of direction and placement. To me, the driver is the placement. It sets the hole up for the next shot. It's not, I'm going to hit it into infinity, because no one does that. And then you see Rory McIlroy or some of these guys that hit it pretty close to 400 yards. And we can't wait to get to the tee to do that. Well, no. You're not in their category, and never will be. You have to play the game based on your game and not anybody else's. And I highly recommend for anyone listening there, find a speed that you can finish perfectly and hold your follow-through position where you're in balance. That's the speed you should swing the driver. And the better you get, and you can make it go a little faster, but still be unbalanced. But if you're falling all over the place, you're swinging too hard.
Phenomenal tip. That is such a fabulous piece of advice. Oh, my God, I'm so happy with that. Thank you. That's great. Okay. I got to end here with a quick anecdote about my round yesterday. I was playing with these 3 guys that are actually around the same age as my younger son. And one of them, my son wrestled in high school for 4 years. And one of the guys that I was playing with wrestled against my son's team. And so he knew him. And so because I knew that the kid wrestled, it allowed me to, communicate with him in a better level. But what I noticed in the first 4 holes, he had absolutely no hip turn on his swing. And his address position was pretty much kind of slouchy shoulder, stand straight up. So he really wasn't in a ready position, and he wasn't doing anything. And he couldn't get the ball off the ground. He was rolling it. He was duffing it. He was missing it left and right. So I do not give advice, swing advice on a golf course. I don't do that. And sometimes if I have an observation that might help on a mental part or a strategic part, I'll do that. But I'll stay away from swing mechanics, especially during a round. But I said to the guy, when I found out that he wrestled, I said, where do you get all your power when you wrestle? And he said, in your hips. And I went, uh-huh. And he kind of looked at me and I said, you don't turn your hips when you're hitting the golf ball. And he went, oh my, right? I said, what's your ready position when you're wrestling? And he immediately got into this very athletic position and, like looking right at me, and I'm going, uh-huh. Look at the way you're positioned when you start off the tee. And from that point on, he played the best golf of his life and broke 100 for the second or third time in his life. He was very, and even thanked me at the end of the round. He says, that one tip about my hips made all the difference for me.
Well, so you did something there that good teachers are able to do. You got him to relate to something that he does, so that he could. It wasn't foreign to him, and that's it. That was great. That was very astute on your part, because a lot of people teach, but they're more pontificating than teaching. And you made him relate to something that he does in a different sport, but was germane to the sport he was playing. So that was great. That was great stuff. I play with a lot of fellows that I teach, and when we're out there playing, they're trying to show me how good they're doing and so forth. And I understand all that, because when I've played with touring pros, I did the same darn thing. But I try to stay away from quick tips, other than to say, you might want to slow it down a little bit, or you might want to widen your stance a bit. But I don't get into too many swing tips, because if they overemphasize that, they're going to fall apart at the seams, and then they're going to be looking at you and say, you ruined my day. They're not going to say it, but they're going to feel it. So
sure.
you have to be careful with tips on the golf course. But that was real smart on your part.
Well, thank you. I was actually fishing for the compliment. I appreciate that.
No, that was because you got him to equate to something else, but something that he's comfortable doing. See, so that's great stuff.
Yeah, well, the first teacher that I ever had in golf, his first question, and this was huge for me, his first question was, what sports did you play as a kid? And from that point on, he just made me, he put it in those terms, of what sports that I played and how I can translate that into improving in my golf. And I always thought that was an incredibly valuable tool, because all I did was ask the kid a question. He fixed it himself. Once he realized what it meant in relation to his golf game, I didn't do a thing. I just made an observation to him.
Yeah. Well, I'll just tell you a real quick story. One time I was inside the pro shop. I was watching the guy on the range, and he pulled up this beautiful set of Callaway clubs, beautiful bag. I mean, he had invested a lot in product. He gets up there, and I'm watching him, and a pretty strong-looking guy, and he was slicing everything. I mean, just sad. And I kept watching him, so I thought, I can't handle it anymore. So I went out and I said, let me ask you something. Have you ever played baseball? He said, yeah, I was a really good baseball player. I said, just take out a club and imagine that you're hitting a low pitch. How would you hit a low pitch? And he swung with a kind of a baseball action, released his hands, released the club head. And I said, yeah, that's pretty good. I said, now why don't you treat that golf ball like it's a low pitch? Just go ahead and take a good baseball cut at it. And of course, he hit a ball out there with a little bit of a draw. And he looked at me like God had spoken to him. So he hit it. Little by little by little, you could see he was swinging the club in a motion that he was familiar with. And that's really, as a boy, when I first caddied, I caddied so I could make enough money to buy clothes for school. And I could play baseball pretty good as a young kid. Like a lot of young kids, we all played baseball. And those were my first thoughts to hit a golf ball. was just to hit the back of that ball with a kind of a baseball action, and I could clobber the thing right off the bat. I never sliced the ball when I started playing because I equated it more to baseball. Now, if I had been given some formal lessons, I'm sure I would have sliced the heck out of the ball. So sometimes those are the best lessons, when you can open up a guy's or a gal's mind to something that they've done in their past when it comes to hitting a golf ball, especially women. Gosh, I teach a lot of women, and I talk to them. Have you ever played baseball? Have you ever played tennis? And then we try to use a similar stroke, and it works like magic.
Well, Tony, I don't want to equate you with God, but there's something godlike. No, wait. Let me finish my sentence, my friend. There is something godlike about great teachers, and you are a great teacher. And I really appreciate you spending so much time with me every time I call. Thank you.
Well, listen, I love your show, and I know the listeners to your podcast love your show, and to be a small part of it is really an honor for me, believe me.